Is your company moving applications into public cloud? Well, now you have problems, as your on-premises security products don't work for public cloud, traditional security assessments don't give you the real picture, and the biggest security threat is now misconfiguration of your cloud workloads. CloudNeedy offers you a cloud-native approach to manage security, data privacy, and compliance. With CloudNeedy, you gain instant visibility into your security posture and the ability to continuously monitor and remediate any deviations. Take a free test drive of CloudNeedy's continuous cloud assurance platform by visiting cloudneedy.com/securityweekly. That's cloud, N-E-E-T-I. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys, your employees, your contractors, and privileged users. 60% of online attacks are carried out by insiders. To stop these insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. Observit combats insider threats by detecting risk activity, investigating in minutes, effectively responding, and stopping data lost. Give it a test drive at observit.com/securityweekly. The modern attack surface is vast and permeable, extending from the data center to the cloud and device edge. Security teams are stretched thinner and thinner as they try to cover this ground. The result? More high-profile breaches hit the news every day. Don't let your organization be next. ExtraHop delivers security from the inside out, helping enterprise security teams detect threats up to 95% faster and cut staff time to resolve by 2/3 or more. Act with confidence. Learn more at extrahop.com/securityweekly.
Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. I am your host, Matt Alderman, joined by Joff Thayer. As the market leader of award-winning security policy orchestration solutions, Tufin provides enterprises with the ability to streamline the management of security policies across complex, heterogeneous environments. With more than 2,000 customers, Tufin automatically designs, provisions, analyzes, and audits network security configuration changes from the application layer down to the network layer, accurately and securely. It assures business continuity with a tight security posture, rapid service delivery, and regulatory compliance across physical, private, public, and hybrid cloud environments. To learn more, please visit securityweekly.com/Tufin. Secure World Boston is hosting their 15th annual conference March 27th and 28th at the Heinz Convention Center. Security Weekly listeners save $100 off a full conference pass by visiting the secureworldexpo.com and using the discount code SecurityWeekly. Also, join us April 1st to 3rd at Disney's Contemporary Resort for InfoSec World 2019. Visit infosecworld.misty.com/securityweekly and use the registration code OS19-SecWeek for 15% off the main conference or World Pass. We will be recording at InfoSec World 2019. If you're interested in booking an interview or briefing with Security Weekly, please visit securityweekly.com/conference request to learn more. All right, let's get into the articles this week. So, Joff, this week I broke the articles down into two buckets. I have product announcements and launches, and then kind of the business side, business announcements, funding, acquisitions, because there's been some activity, as we talked about in the previous segment, in the SOAR market. So let's start with the product announcements. And I'm going to start with Microsoft Azure AD identity protection now revolves around risky users and risky sign-ins. Basically, this is enhancements, it looks like, to the Azure AD to provide some additional identity protection. I guess this is pretty smart, considering a lot of enterprises are starting to move into Azure and Azure Active Directory. So identity protection, some additional stuff makes a lot of sense here.
Oh, absolutely. I've been really very impressed with Microsoft's strategy, to be honest, over the past few years as they've rolled out Azure. They were a little later than others, but their strategy has definitely been a long play, and I think they've slowly built up the various building blocks that both operations and security teams are in need of, and they're doing it in a very deliberate and obviously driven way that is giving people the tools that they need to work with. So it's really good to see identity access management protection tools coming into this mix as well.
Yeah, I mean, everybody was focused on Amazon originally in the cloud space, right? I mean, that was the 800-pound gorilla. But what we've seen Microsoft do very effectively is, bundle in Azure capabilities as part of their enterprise license agreements for their enterprise customers. And now you're seeing enterprises adopting more of the Microsoft Azure platform, including AD. So you're right. Their strategy has been really good is that because they had the enterprise base, they've done a pretty good job of convincing those enterprises to leverage Azure-based services over maybe going to Google or AWS.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. And I think, you're going to see more and more the integration of enterprise and cloud getting tighter. And I think it's not only Microsoft that's obviously playing in that market, but I think Microsoft has definitely set a tone there that other vendors are going to follow. I mean, something I've been reading a lot about lately is the open flow and software driven networking approaches, and I think that's another example where you're going to see some software control plane based networking and related security applications extend as time goes by, extend more or less transparently into cloud offerings from the on-premise world and vice versa. And the more transparent and easy integrations we get there, the better off we're all going to be.
Agreed. Yeah, that kind of ties into this next article. Attivo Networks introduces multi-cloud secure service mesh solution for applications deployed in Kubernetes. So let me break this down first because that's a mouthful. In
Sure
the
is.
application space, everybody's been talking about this concept of the service mesh. And so you're starting to see a lot of buzz around the service mesh. Really what they're doing here is they're basically building a microsegmentation proxy service for these new containerized applications, whether they're running in Kubernetes or elsewhere. This is very Kubernetes focused, but at the end of the day, the orchestrator could be anything. So like I said, it's an interesting announcement, but the approach here is what concerns me a little bit. We're taking traditional on-premise networking concepts like proxies and gateways and trying to apply them in these new containerized applications. And my one concern here is, does this really work in this new software-defined containerized world? And is this really a good solution, a valuable solution, or can it be done differently? I don't know.
I think that story's yet to be written. A lot of us have grown up, in the traditional sort of OSI layered stack kind of world, and with the introduction of cloud integration technologies, open flow again, I'd mention, with software defined networking. We're seeing that traditional stack model being broken down in some sense, right? In some cases, we're seeing some merging of the different layers of the model into what I think is going to emerge to be almost a new paradigm in the way that we are dealing with various traditional applications. I mean, you look at the containerization that's occurring, you look at the orchestration that Kubernetes offers, then you look at all of the cloud offerings and how software defines such a huge role in everything that's happening there from a control plane perspective. We're really seeing a lot of things thrown up in the air and being reevaluated, and our whole paradigm is kind of shifting here. So I think the story is yet to be written, and those that are out front are going to have some interesting experiences. May not necessarily be positive, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I've seen some of these other microsegmentation vendors trying to do microsegmentation, like I think New Vector's another one that does this, but they're all trying to do it from the outside. At Layered Insight, we could do aspects of that from the inside the container. So I agree. I think it's yet to be seen how these new technologies and these new solutions either do or don't work as we continue to evolve. So just something interesting to keep an eye on.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, CylancePROTECT is now available on AWS Marketplace. Obviously, this makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, if you're running instances in Amazon and you want to put Cylance on, now it's available in the marketplace. I think this supports Windows, Mac, Linux, Amazon Linux. I mean, kind of a no-brainer for those environments that are very hybridized.
I think this is a good move on their part. I do, we've certainly had some fun with Cylance at Black Hills a little bit back and forth, and they're a good bunch of folks, very smart, doing the right things. Some of their endpoint protection that is in place in the EDR market has been very, very effective, and is making a real difference. So to extend that same level of protection into the cloud is really a nice extension of what they're doing. So I think that's a really good move, and wish them all the success.
Yeah, and I think others are I mean, pretty much any on-premise based product will have to continue to support ease of getting these onto cloud assets, right? So all the endpoint guys are going to have offerings available in the marketplace just to make it easier to deploy their solutions in these, like I said, these hybridized environments. So I think you're going to see more of these types of announcements.
Yeah, I'd expect so as well. That's people want, even though their data centers may have moved, even though their endpoints may be virtualized in some cases, people do want the same level of defensibility of those environments, and you're naturally going to see those products offered in that space. It's the right thing to do.
Yep. All right, Isolate extends cybersecurity isolation platform. Do you know anything about Isolate?
I don't. I have to be honest. Cybersecurity isolation. Interesting.
Yeah. So what they do is they build a virtualized environment, right? So they try to take all the applications and the things that are running on the endpoint, and they put them into their own VMs so that they can isolate them from each other. So you're not getting kind of cross-attack contamination. It's an interesting concept. And so they've added some additional capabilities, around USB control, VPN, and some other sensitive information protection. The thing I'm trying to figure out, though, is I think Apple is already starting to move down the path of containerizing the Mac operating system. And so as the operating system vendors start to isolate their own operating systems through a concept of containerization or virtualization, do these solutions have longevity or not? It'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, so I see in the article that they're speaking of software-defined endpoints, which the endpoints have multiple isolated virtual environments, to quote the article directly. So yeah, it's another level of containerization, slim hypervisor layer, as they put it again in that article. It's I think from a security play perspective, yet another cut at trying to sandbox things away from each other to provide that level of isolation for various functions, whether it's emails or whether it's casual browsing or whatever, and prevent that level of cross contamination, which I think is a good direction. I think that's a very nice way to prevent a lot of peer kind of threats, which we as attackers often do exploit, certainly in the pen testing space.
Yeah, so I like the concept. I'm just curious whether, if the OS vendors do this themselves, which I think Apple has been working on for a couple of years now. I'm just not sure if this has longevity or how this plays out. But I like the concept because it does create some level of isolation for cross attacks. So.
Yeah, so usually where you see these kinds of solutions break down, and we've seen them before break down, and that is in the convenience area, right? I often think about security and convenience being sort of diametrically opposed, and when some sort of exception is made for the usage from a convenience perspective of such technologies, that usually builds some sort of trusted interface, which actually breaks down the initial protection.
Got it. Duality lets you have your cake and eat it too. So this is an interesting company. Duality's around data protection, encryption, talks a lot in this article about the benefits of homomorphic encryption. There's a couple vendors working on this concept of homomorphic encryption. But in this particular article, what they're talking about from a duality perspective is the ability to keep your data encrypted, but also have the ability to analyze that encrypted data without needing to decrypt it, which I think is a very interesting concept in our space. Because, look, at the end of the day, it's all about the data. And if we can do a better job of encrypting our data and still allowing us to do analysis and analytics on that data without decrypting it, it changes, I think, the cybersecurity industry dramatically, because now it's all about the data.
So that's I'm trying to work out what their play is here. If they're trying to solve a key management problem, that would be very interesting. But I don't think that's what they're trying to do here. They're looking at
there's a little bit of key management discussion in here. What I think they're playing an analytics on top of encrypted data. I'm not sure if they're actually doing the data encryption themselves. I could be wrong. I didn't dig into all of Duality's capabilities, but it was an interesting concept.
Yeah. But yeah, having the ability to do things in a distributed fashion without having to decrypt data is always useful, obviously, because data in transit's not going to be a problem per se. Doing sort of data mining on encrypted data, I'm not quite sure what they're getting at, to be honest.
We'll dig into it some more. These last two articles on the product side are pretty similar. So Attivo Networks enhances deception platform with forensics collection. And then Elusive Networks introduces the interactive cyber intelligence to better defend organization against human attackers. They both sound very similar. They're both in the deception market, and it looks like both of them are adding additional forensics capabilities to augment their deception, to collect additional information that can be used to enhance other protection mechanisms in the environment.
So interactive cyber intelligence, there's quite a mouthful on this last one, right? Let me say that again. Interactive cyber intelligence to better defend organizations against human attackers. Woo, human attackers. There's a lot there. I see this as any kind of decision support that companies can offer that helps humans. It's a little bit like SOAR in a way, but conceptually anyway. That helps humans actually be able to sort noise from actually high granular useful information is always going to be a good play, right? The thing we keep saying continuously in this industry is that we're overwhelmed with just the sheer volume of what we're dealing with from a defender perspective. And I think the game here is any technology that you can deploy that will help increase the granularity, will help increase the level of predictability and accuracy of that knowledge and filter out noise is going to be a good, useful technology for companies to actually be able to deploy. And that's a very tough nut to solve. And of course, it's a moving target because human attackers, once they learn that there is a defense technology that is potentially spotting their patterns of behavior, potentially being detected, they're going to change strategies.
Right. And that's what this is supposed to be doing, right? Is collecting that data to really understand the techniques and the processes being used so they can leverage that to better protect the environment. And if the hackers know that, then they might be changing some of their practices, right? But yeah, I to your point, Joff, great data to collect. The question is, do we have the people to leverage that data to do the right things with it? We'll see over time. maybe that's where the SOARs fit in a little bit. But I thought it was interesting that both of these vendors basically announced the same capabilities like in the same week. It was just ironic.
Yeah, I think one of them's taking more of a incident response approach in that last article. The other one's more on the forensics, which is again more post analysis rather than a real time kind of approach. So we've got slight different angle on similar problems, I think.
Yeah. All right. So, Joff, this is good news for us. The global cybersecurity market will be $365.26 billion by 2026, growing at a CAGR of 16.1%. That means there's a lot of stuff for people to spend money on over the next few years.
I always like these kinds of stories. There's been money spent in the industry. It's a great industry to be in. I highly encourage people to continue to stay in the industry and work hard at it. I think it's going to be very rewarding, and clearly this one is showing growth. And I was just thinking to myself, 2026, am I still going to be in the game? Probably. I'll probably have less hair than I even have now, and that's not much anyway.
Yeah, I mean, 7 years. Yeah, we're probably still around. But here's the things. There might be some investors that listen to the show. I know there's some that listen to BSW. 16% growth.
That's aggressive.
That's aggregate. But that means there's markets growing slower than that and other markets growing faster than that, because this is kind of an aggregate across the board. And I think what's important to know is that there are certain markets that will see decreased growth over the next few years, and emerging markets that will have higher growth rates associated to them, which averages out at a 16% CAGR. And so when you see some of these analysts, these updates from some of the public companies and other things that said they're growing at 40%, which market segment are they in? Is that market segment growing that fast, or aren't they? Just things to think about, because on an aggregate basis, 16%. I mean, if you're an investor, you want 20+% growth, and the market's only growing at 16. So you got to pick and choose where you're making your investments, I think, is kind of the moral of the story.
Yeah, I think that's always the case. I think we're back to a really exciting moment, actually, in the industry right now. And it goes in waves, as you're well aware, Matt. And I think we're beginning a phase of real exciting change in the industry that we haven't seen in quite some time. And it's really reflected in all of these articles that we have up here. The play of integrating cloud and on-prem stuff, and more as people are adopting cloud, and that integration is starting to occur. The automation of incident response and orchestration of various security technologies with platforms like SOAR, the amazing scalability and growth of virtualization technologies in the application layer, Docker, your Kubernetes, all that stuff. It's we're entering a period of change that if we thought life was tough 5 years ago and things were moving fast, I think it's just going to get more and more interesting as we go. And I am actually really optimistic with respect to the ability to scale the response challenge in the information security industry. I think that's been the real piece there that we've been lagging at for some time. And everybody's saying we can't get enough humans that have the talent. But if we can actually start to really leverage, and everybody got their drink ready, really leverage things like machine learning and AI in some of these new areas, and accelerate. And I'm actually, I say the buzzwords somewhat in jest, but accelerate the ability for humans to focus their talent only where it needs to be focused, instead of on the things that are repeatable processes. We're going to all be in a much better place, because there really isn't enough of us to go around. And so we have to automate, and we have to deploy software and technologies that are going to help us scale our responses to the demands that are out there.
Absolutely. It's all about getting to a decision to make an action faster. And that leads into this next article because, I've tracked these guys for a long time. Kenna Security more than doubles revenue for fourth year in a row. We talked last week about vulnerability management, threat vulnerability management, and kind of that evolution to prioritization. Kenna's been around for a number of years. I've known Ed Bellis since when it was originally Risk.io. Karim, the CEO, I know really, really well. These guys are doing some really interesting stuff of taking data, vulnerability data, bringing it together, understanding where the threat vectors are, understanding the criticality of the asset, and driving prioritization to help individuals really understand these are the 10 most important things I can do today from a risk-based perspective, right? Back to that point, Joff, is if we can make the humans better at making decisions and giving them those priorities, we're going to do a better job of protecting our environments. And these guys have done really well over the past few years and continue to grow. I think they're up to like 50 million in raise after last year's Series C. Just this is an area that's growing faster than that 16% when we talk about the overall market.
Yeah, and it's an exciting development, right? I mean, it's good to see some very, very creative, intelligent folks working on some really tough problems. I mean, the things that we talk about and bemoan often on these shows are not easy problems to solve. It's easy for a lot of us to be armchair quarterbacks and sit back and criticize. It's much harder to actually put your big pants on and go solve some of these problems. And this is what some of these folks are doing, and it's really, really good to see.
Yes. Elevate Security set to solve the human element of cybersecurity. They just announced an $8 million Series A. And what they're building, which I think is a little interesting, is what they call a security behavior platform. What they're trying to do is model the behavior of users so that we can identify normal and abnormal behavior to try to protect aspects of us as an attack vector. Interesting concept. I know others who have tried to do this as kind of some homegrown systems. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
It always reminds me. It will be interesting to see how it plays out. I agree. It always reminds me. Some of the jokes we tell on Security Weekly at night and the shows. We typically revolve around the idea that things like, hey, pen testing would be really fun if we could just get the humans out of the way, right? Or security problems would be solved if we could just get the humans out of the way. So for somebody to be focusing on a human modeling problem is really fascinating, actually, because so many of us and so many of our customers would tell us, you're just telling us stuff that we know is true. We know the humans are the problem, but we're doing everything we can to make them behave better, but it's not happening, right? It's just right. Eventually you get that the point of no return, or the threshold of you can't expect every one of your users in the organization to be a cybersecurity expert. You can expect at the most for them to be assistive technology in your efforts to help, and maybe that's where these guys are going. If you can get your users on board, I always said this to some of my chief information security officer friends. If you get your people on board to be your advocate of what you're trying to achieve in the business, you're basically scaling yourself up, and that's always a good thing.
Yeah, I mean so to me the big issue here, and this is where the future resides, is the user, the human, and the application are becoming our new perimeter. And I think anybody who can solve aspects of the human element, whether it's human behavior or other activities to protect us as humans, is a good thing, because we're going to become part of that new perimeter as we continue to move our applications out into the cloud, and we allow our users to continue to connect to applications from anywhere, not within the four walls of a corporation. And so anything around these user application and data elements are always intriguing to me, because I see that as the new frontier of what we have to protect. And Elevate Security, obviously, trying to work on aspects of the behavior side of that.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, and I think it supports um, the overall idea that the threat hunting community is also taking, and in fact, I think in general, a lot of security technologies are taking the approach of, if we can actually model behaviors, if we can model the behavior of the people, or model the behavior of the environment, or model some combination of that behavior with technology, then we can sort of get a bead on what's going on, and take our eyes off the traditional try to stop it, but more try to understand it and then stop it in a more intelligent way.
Yes, agreed. All right, IT asset management firm Axonius raises $13 million in a Series A led by Bessemer Venture Partners. This one's a little interesting to me. Look, we all know that the asset problem is kind of where things start, right? The discovery of assets, the classification of assets. So here you have an IT asset management firm taking some additional funding, and now they're trying to solve bringing all that asset data together. My only question here is, we've got some other really big asset management companies in the mix, like ServiceNow, and I'm trying to figure out how these guys fit into what a ServiceNow is already doing with the CMDB and all the things they do on the service management side. Because I think going up against a ServiceNow is really difficult, but I wish them luck, because this is a big problem for us to get our arms around.
It's a crowded market. There's no doubt. I think asset management is definitely a very important thing. If we look at the top 20 security controls, originally produced by SANS, and now a part of the CSC folks. I mean, you already know that asset and inventory is, both from a software and a hardware perspective, is one of the first 5 or first 6 basic security controls that people need to have in place. So it's a problem that has to be dealt with if you're going to have any chance of maturing a security operation beyond simply reactive. You have to have a sense of what your assets look like. Now, I think the asset management world has gotten more complex because we have assets that are virtualized, that are sitting in cloud solutions. We have assets that are on mobile phones, software assets, hardware assets, assets that are sitting on tablets. We've seen an incredible diversity in the asset world, if you make sure that you're including the definition of assets being that which scales beyond hardware, which most of us do. You think about assets in terms of hardware and software, and you do have a huge challenge to solve there. So, but yeah, it's a dense space. So I'm not quite sure what their approach is and how unique it is, where it may differ from some of the others.
Yeah, they talk about IoT and cloud. In, to your point, software, just containers. Where are the containers? Which pods are they running on? Which regional zone in Amazon or wherever are they running? I mean, the problem of asset management has gotten more complex. And so if they've got some innovative things here to bring some of those new asset types together, both from a hardware and a software perspective, there's definitely challenges there to be solved. But to your point, it's a crowded space. There are some big vendors in this space that are trying to tackle this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I kind of look at it as a tree that's blooming. I remember years ago when we first, and this is really years ago, which is amazing to talk about, when we first introduced operating system virtualization, with the likes of VMware deploying very quickly, and the hypervisors from Microsoft and so on. People started to get very, very concerned about asset management when that started to happen. Well, now we're in a situation where we have virtualization of operating systems occurring within virtualized operating systems, and then within those virtualized operating systems, we have application containerization occurring. So, I sort of think about it as a tree model. The leaves are spread way, way out now, and we have many layers of abstraction and many different assets to track. So it's definitely a huge space that needs attention.
Yes, definitely. It's become exponentially harder because of all this abstraction, not only at the virtualization layer, but the container layer, as you just said.
Yep.
All right, got a couple announcements, acquisition announcements. So I think a week or two ago, we talked about the rumor of Palo Alto talking about buying Demisto. Well, it's official, folks. Cybersecurity provider Palo Alto to buy Demisto for $560 million. This is what I was talking about in our last segment a little bit. A lot of activity, Phantom being bought by Splunk last year. Now we see Palo Alto buying Demisto on the SOAR side. A lot of activity in this SOAR space. So the rumor has now been confirmed. Cash and stock, $560 million.
That's a pretty healthy number. Interesting. Now, what kind of play are they after here? I'm not quite sure what Demisto actually does. Are you aware of what the functionality that they're looking for here is,
Well,
Matt?
so they're a security orchestration and automation response company. And my guess is Palo Alto's looking at integrating some of their capabilities probably into their firewall platform and maybe some other areas because they have the endpoint solution. They have their malware. Uh, was that wildfire that they can detect,
Yep.
evaluate malware. They've got the firewall stuff. So they're probably looking to integrate some of the orchestration automation capabilities across their platform. Like I said, SOAR is a hot space right now on automating certain tasks. Splunk made kind of the first move when they bought Phantom, and that acquisition was about $640 million, if I recall. This is still a pretty big acquisition, not as big as the Phantom one, but again, this concept of orchestrating and automating into the Palo Alto portfolio looks like is where they're going.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just actually saw that having clicked on the announcement. Yeah, that's. I think we're back to that same theme, right? The Palo Alto traditionally have been a combination of endpoint and firewall in network kind of vendor, and now they're trying to extend out by the looks and make the alerts, the metrics, the information that's being gathered, both from an incident and non-incident response perspective, available for the orchestration platform. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes.
Yes, definitely. The second acquisition announcement is Micro Focus completes acquisition of Interset to further expand cybersecurity expertise. Now, this one's interesting because Micro Focus bought a lot of the HP security portfolio. So they bought ArcSight and Vertica, which is the big data analytics software. So it looks like what they did is they bought Interset, which is a user and entity behavior analytics capability. And they're looking to integrate it both into Vertica for big data analytics, but also into ArcSight, and which makes sense to me. The SIM and the UEBA starting to come together. So this looks like a very logical acquisition. We haven't heard much from Micro Focus after they bought the HP assets. This is kind of one of the first big announcements I've seen from Micro Focus after that. So an interesting acquisition here.
It shows you that through all these articles, clearly we have a theme emerging, right? And the idea is to scale, to automate, orchestrate, and on top of that, to bring analytics and artificial intelligence, machine learning kind of approaches to some of these problems that we're trying to solve.
Yes, definitely. And my last article for the day is Tenable Double Cyber Exposure Technology Integration to help customers manage and measure cyber risk holistically. What this really is an announcement of 43 new enhanced technology integrations and 20 new integration partners. And this is huge. When I was at Tenable running strategy, this was one of the things that I thought was important, is that you have to integrate your data into other solutions and other solutions data into your solutions. And they've really enhanced the number of integrations and the number of integration partners they have to allow organizations who have lots of different security tools out there to integrate the data back and forth. And so that's what this announcement was about. They list some big ones here with CyberArk, Palo Alto, ServiceNow, and Splunk. Obviously, household names of technologies that exist in a lot of enterprises. And Tenable's doing a lot more integration directly with these vendors.
Yeah, that's really good to see, actually. I just noticed on there, Cisco's on the list as well. They had a mention of Cisco Identity Services Engine, which is a quite large and involved product for many people to implement. So it's really nice to see some integration occurring and vendors such as Tenable and others starting to open up these APIs and start to do a lot more integration with the kinds of things they're doing. It again makes me optimistic that there is a little hope for the future, and that we don't have to all rely so much on some of the homegrown, cobbled together stuff that many of us in the industry have been involved with in the past.
Yes, exactly right. All right, that's the news. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week on Enterprise Security Weekly.